First off, congratulations for deciding to start a bullet journal. It's been one of the most game-changing things in my life, both personally and professionally, that I've ever done for myself. You've probably scrolled the internet looking for inspiration in the cool new stationery that you'd like to buy. Perhaps you've checked out some of your favorite creators for things as well. If you've checked out my collection, you know I have quite an extensive collection. I have a lot, but today I wanted to share the 7 most important things for you to have as you're starting your new bullet journal. If you already have a journal, it does not have to be any of these, you're absolutely fine. You can journal in any type of notebook. But for me personally, over time, I've learned that there are really important features of a notebook that make the experience even better. And the most important part for me has to be the paper that's inside of the notebook. In my experience, I've come across kind of 3 main types, and there's a lot that's in between. Something like the Leuchtturm 1917 or the official Bullet Journal Edition 1 has 80 GSM paper inside of it. 80 GSM paper, while you can fit a lot of pages inside of this notebook, you do come across an issue of ghosting. And ghosting means that you can see what's on the page that's before it. It's not bleeding through, the ink isn't coming through the page, but you can see some of the writing that's going to be on the other side. Leuchtturm and Bullet Journal in the Edition 2, which is the one that I just used, made that a little bit better by upping it to 120 GSM. So the ghosting isn't as bad. The paper is ever so slightly thicker, but it's not really taking away from how many pages you have inside of your notebooks. Some of the best notebooks that I've come across, and one of my favorite brands, is Archer and Olive. I use these quite a bit over the years. What I love about their notebook paper is it's 160 GSM. So it's super thick, and you can do any type of spreads inside of here, and it's rare that you're ever going to see any of the ink or anything from the previous page on the other side. It gives you really nice, clean pages to work with. In just a few minutes, we're going to talk about some of my favorite pens to start your bullet journal with. But if you have other stationery around and you want to see how well your pens and your stationery and your markers do inside of your notebook, the thing I like to do is actually just take the last page of my journal and do a pen test on that. Anything that I think I might be using inside of here, I'm going to test out on that page. And that way, if I flip over, I can see what's going to ghost or what's going to bleed and what's safe to use inside of my journal. The biggest no-nos inside of your journal, regardless of the paper, are not using Sharpies and not using alcohol markers. Every single journal that I've used, regardless of the paper or how thick the paper is, these two bleed and come right through that page, and they're just really not the safest things to use inside of your journal. If you don't have a lot of pens in your collection, you don't have enough to really do a pen test, here are my 3 favorite pens to start a bullet journal with. The first one is going to be my ride or die. I call it this because I can literally use this anytime and I can 100% trust that it's going to do a good job. This is the Uniball Signo DX. What I love about the pen is its fine point. You can do a lot with that if you want to try to do some faux lettering with it, for instance. You can create those thicks or thinners with it. You can do different types of lettering. I've never had an issue with this pen skipping or drying out on me, and I don't even know how many I've gone through over the years. It's basically, I found this and I was like, this is my pen forever and always. You can buy them in large quantities just off of Amazon or something like that, and I'll link that down for you below. Relatively inexpensive. It's not a cheap pen per se, but it's also not a really expensive pen, and it's really, honestly, one of the best. This next pen is actually brand new to me. This is the Pilot multi-ball pen. This thing is so cool because, first of all, it writes amazingly inside of your notebooks. It has a little bit of a thicker line to it, which is fine, but you're not getting any ghosting or bleed through. My favorite part of this pen so far, though, is that it can write on almost anything. Let's take these transparent stickies, for instance. These have a little bit of a thicker surface on them, a little slippery, but the pen writes on it without any problem whatsoever. Or let's say I wanted to write the name of an ink on the side of here. If I'm using something like my Uniball, which I love so much for a journal, it's actually not going to write on here at all. But the Pilot multi-ball will actually write right on top of the plastic. I don't have to use a Sharpie or anything like that. This pen really does it all. Because this pen is brand new to me, I've only just scratched the surface of what I'm sure it can write on, but I love it for my journal and I love it just for how it writes and really just anything that I can do with it. And the third pen we're going to talk about is the Sarasa Mark-On. This is from the Zebra Pen Company. You might know them, probably most known for their Mildliners, which we are going to talk about in just a few minutes. The reason that I love this pen oh so much is that not only does it write well inside of your journal, that's a really, really important part of this. This one is also a 0.5 millimeter, so it gets a little bit thicker than the other ones as well. If you don't like a super thin point pen, this is right up your alley without going overly bold. With my time using it, I've never had an issue with it skipping ink or running out of ink or doing anything. It just always works. But what has to be my favorite part about this pen is that you can use a Mildliner over top of it. And you might be thinking, Mark, well, aren't you supposed to use highlighters over top of pens? That doesn't make any sense. But what you'll see is that certain pens don't do as well as others with the Mildliners. It's a known issue that had been going on for a very long time, and they thought, oh, let me go ahead and create a pen that works well with it. The Signo DX has always done very well. Again, I'm always a fan, but something like a Sharpie pen, for instance, when you're highlighting over top of it, you'll see that it starts to smear. You can see it a little bit better here when I'm using a super light color like this yellow over top of it as well. We are going to talk about those in just a second, but first I want to talk about probably the biggest underrated item inside of your arsenal when you're bullet journaling, which is a pencil. Pencils are fantastic ways to draw things out inside of your journal first, whether it's with spacing, maybe you're doing something with lettering, but you're not quite sure if it's going to work out. Pencil is just so great because you can always erase it after you're done. One of my favorite things to do inside of my bullet journal is create weekly overviews or perhaps a collection page that needs to be blocked off. It doesn't really matter what type of pencil you're using, just make sure to stay away from the really dark drawing pencils. You really want something that's very light, very soft, that's easy to erase off of your page. The next item that's important to have as you start your bullet journal is going to be some type of a ruler. There are so many different ones out there in different types. You have ones that have cork on the bottom, ones that don't. You have these cool plastic ones, and the reason I love these the most is because there's a slight edge that's on these here. And this edge has been something that's been really helpful for me. So something we actually saw happen when we did that last example here is that after I put down my pen and moved my ruler over, when it was on the flat edge here, it actually moved the ink over with it. I personally see this happen most with a lot of highlighters and things like that that tend to be a little inkier. What happens is that the ink gets caught underneath of that ruler when you're writing with it, and then when you go to pull it away, you don't have as nice of a line or it pulls it over. But if you flip your ruler over and do that, there's a little gap that's underneath of there that saves anything from being pulled. It just creates a little bit of safe space, and one of the reasons that I love these rulers so much. The next item that's good to have when you start a bullet journal is some type of a page holder. The reason that I like to have extra one of these is because most journals are going to come with 2 page holders. There's some journals that only come with 1. The Bullet Journal Edition 1 was one of my favorites because it came with 3 different ones, but sometimes you might come across journals that don't have any at all. And as you're working through these journals, sometimes you're going to find that it's just important just to know where you are sometimes. So slipping a small little page holder or paper clip inside of here can get you to exactly where you need to go much quicker than trying to flip through and see what you're looking for. There, of course, are going to be a lot of different options for you. Archer and Olive has had these really cool page holders that have nice little icons kind of here at the top that really stick out of your book. Gives it an extra cool, very neat design. I've also come to love these little book darts. Very slim, very out of the way, nothing protruding out, but you can always find it really nice and easily when you're working inside of your journal. You can always use binder clips. These we probably already have laying around the house. They can stay relatively flat, but also really pull out your page if you need them to be. And I've also become really big fans of just these giant page clips. I find them extremely helpful if you're trying to keep your notebook open all the way so your pages aren't folding over as you're working. And they can be very versatile. Clip a few pages together if you want versus just one. It's always been really nice. We talked about them a little bit earlier, but we're going to talk about them last because I don't think that these are necessarily a must-have when you're starting off your bullet journal, but I do think that having some type of color or highlighter is important because it's a really nice and easy way to make things really stand out on the page. Zebra Mildliners over the years have just become a staple of journaling as a whole because of all the different colors and variations. You have your standard chiseled edge, which is going to give you a really nice line. The other side is going to be a fine bullet to give you a nice model line. Not too long ago, they came out with their brush pens, which are awesome for lettering, but not super heavy ink, very light, with the same bullet end on the other side. Over the years, I've really come to love them as well, just as a really nice way to add a little bit of color to your page, especially if you're just using a single black pen or blue pen, but you don't want to have a whole lot of markers. You can buy a small little 5 or 6 pack of these and whatever color variations that you like. They're great for creating quick headers. You can just use that bullet end if you want and just write out the days of the week. And something else I like to really do is use them to just add a little bit of extra flair to the page. So something like a colored drop shadow on a box in a collection page is a really nice and easy way to dress up the page a little bit, make it a little bit more fun. Let me know in the comment section below what your favorite stationery is that you've used inside of your journal, or if you're just getting started, let me know what you'd like to learn about more here on this channel, especially when it comes to pen and stationery for your bullet journal, and I'd love to talk more about it. Thank you so much for hanging out. I'll talk to you next time. See ya.